So with that, I present Kem Hinton, who's going to tell you about the Bicentennial Mall.
Hey, thank you. Yeah. God, it's just great. I know many of you in the room, and thank you for coming. Can everybody hear me okay? Is it pretty good in the back? Okay. So, we're going to have a good time, okay? So if I say something that's wrong, and John Bridges will probably correct me, or David Ewan will, or Keel, or somebody, you can just pop up and say, that's wrong. What I want to do is talk about this crazy project that I got involved in 1991, and just kind of give you an overview that it starts with this, which is the most important single building in the state of Tennessee, our state capital. How many people here have not been inside the Capitol? Okay, so you got to go, okay, because it's magnificent inside. It's enormous. It's a really big structure inside. You wouldn't think of that because, you know, it has multiple layers and everything. It's positioned on the skyline of Nashville. It was designed by William Strickland. William Strickland was an architect in Philadelphia. He was kind of the Greek revival architect of choice in the early 1800s. And he was super successful. He designed this building, which is called the Merchants Exchange Building in Philadelphia. And if you notice, it has a tower on it, a cupola, like our state capitol. Well, this is something that Strickland was following this great interest in our nation about Greek revival architecture. The Greeks had invented democracy. And when we left England and, you know, kind of set off, one of the ways to kind of remind people that we're following the Greek ideals of democracy. So we're going to copy their architecture too, especially for civic buildings or any building of importance. And he did a building, first it was like the Second National Bank in Philadelphia. It looks like a Greek temple. I mean, it's done exquisitely. But then he did this. And in the Merchants Exchange, he took one Greek object and put it on top of another Greek structure. And no one had ever done that with the kind of finesse that he did and the accuracy. And it made him really famous. And he was a hot shot. Now here's our state capitol under construction, okay? You know, it's the Capitol and the cupola on top. Basically, it's a Greek temple, then it has a Greek monument on top. That Greek monument is based on this structure, which is called the monument, the Choragic Monument to Lysikrates, and it's in Athens, and it's a small structure, and it's the Choragic Monument, like in courage, right? No. It's about, choragic means chorus. It is a monument to a choral leader. Now let's think about ancient Greece. What are you doing at night? Hang around with the wife or go down and sing with your buddies. And that's what they did. You had Greek battles, you know, you had athletic battles with the Greeks, the Olympics, but they also did musical, you know, they had theater, all kinds of activities. They sang. And he was really successful, so they built a monument to him. Monument, Choragic Monument to Lysikrates. Well, it's pretty interesting that on top of our state capitol in Music City is a music monument. Isn't that cool? That's so cool. And by the way, you can get up in the top. I've been on top of the thing and everything, but you gotta have, you know, you kind of, if you're interested in doing it, we'll try to grease the skid so you can get up on top. And it's really fun to get on top, but if you have acrophobia, it will kill you. Strickland was a complicated figure. Many books were written about this was his final big project, and he was so excited to come to Nashville, and I don't think that's true. He lost a lot of money in the 1830s. He was in the running to design the expansion of the United States Capitol, you know, the big dome. He lost that to a student of his, and he was in the running for the Washington Monument. It had been designed by Robert Mills, but they hadn't started work on it, and he was hired by a senator from New York State to design an alternative to the Washington Monument. And it was awful. I mean, Mills won that, and we're glad that Mills won the competition. But Strickland may have come to Nashville. He was asked several times to come to Nashville because we want him to design. Other architects were interested in doing the project, but the people at the state were like, no, we need to get Strickland. So they made these inquiries, and he finally accepted, came down. Remember, Nashville was kind of an outpost at that time before the Civil War. And here he had been living in Philadelphia, which was, like New York City. He was a hot shot and everything. I think he came here because he almost had to. He never bought a house. He lived in a hotel here. And he died before the project was finished. And he was buried in the northeast corner of the Capitol. There's one other person buried at the Capitol. Who is that? Samuel Morgan. Samuel Morgan was kind of the state guy in charge of getting the project done. Strickland dies before it's finished. Strickland had a son named Francis Strickland, and he and Morgan, all they do was fight. And it was a very controversial project. It was way over budget. It's rumored that Strickland didn't like the fact that there were convicts working on it and slaves working on it. Okay, now Bill Carey spoke here a few weeks ago in his book called Runaways. Well, he found the ad, and I'd never seen this ad before. It's sort of chilling that, this prominent architect wanted, a group of slaves to come over. But, that's the way the story goes. The building after the Civil War, they finally did landscaping around. The building he designed it in 1845. It started being used in 1854. But it wasn't completely finished until 1859. And I think this is a photo from around 1870 or 1880 after they'd done all the landscaping. For most of Nashville's history, first of all, when it was built, I think it was the largest and tallest and biggest thing built in the southern United States when it was built. It was enormous, huge success, very complicated, very expensive. And for most of Nashville's history, it's the pivotal thing. This photo was taken after the Civil War. There's the Church of the Assumption in the foreground. You see, what in the background. And so it's said that Nashville did not adopt some regulations. They tried to do this in Philadelphia with City Hall, and it didn't work either, to have a height limit on buildings, because when we're in Europe and some of the greatest cities in the world, they make sure you don't supersede things, but we're the land of skyscrapers and cranes. But there were rough areas. After the Civil War, there were beautiful mansions around particularly the east side of the Capitol, and it evolved. But as the turn of the century happened, this is photos taken in 1950, it's pretty rugged. And this sort of corner, the northwest corner of Capitol Hill, was called Hell's Half Acre. And, it's full of prostitution houses, all that good stuff. And it was driving a lot of people absolutely nuts. Photos like this, the state capitol. And then this image. Now, it's interesting, you see the foreground and people are saying, well, we just got to clean this up. What are we going to do? But I want to show you something that could have happened but didn't happen, and it's connected to another talk I'll give in the future called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Okay? So, the Plan of Nashville book, I don't know how many of you have seen it. It was printed in 2005. Keel was involved in it. A lot of people in Nashville were involved in it. Written by Christine Kraling and Mark Shimini, who ran the Nashville Civic Design Center, published a book called The Plan of Nashville. And in it, it said, let's consider views of the Capitol. We have a view of the Capitol from the east. You come on Main Street and you can see it. From the south, you see it from the new public library. From the north, you see it from the Bicentennial Mall. Why don't we do this to the west? Wouldn't that be great? That would be built in a few years. Well, that's what we got. We got a place called Capitol View. Well, guess what? It blocks the view of the Capitol. Except for, I got an angle there, and okay, I can see the most important single building in the state of Tennessee, but all these other things were built, and they're nice buildings. I'm not against the development. It's just somebody should have made sure that they had this vista to the Capitol. The planning group that did this, a very noted firm, Cooper Carey out of Atlanta. I think they showed up, didn't really look around much, and just did, maximize the buildings. That's a shame. Color photos are really interesting of this area. You see how rugged it was. Well, first of all, a lot of historic buildings, and many of these could have been saved, okay? Well, and then further out, there's some buildings, this is kind of a problem. Urban renewal shows up. Nashville was the first city in the United States to have a really large urban renewal project. And it's like the atomic weapon. It shows up and it does a whole lot of things really fast, and then you're dealing with the fallout for the next 50 to 100 years. And that's exactly what happened. They swept it clean and put in a new road. All the business, they developed public housing. This was a noble endeavor. It had some bad sides to it, but also they were trying to make nice places for people to live so they don't have to live in slums. They cleared the hillside. This is 8th Avenue. Cleared the hillside. And then did this, James Robertson Parkway, okay? A beautiful street, very modern, had 2 or 3 hotels, motels on it, a Holiday Inn and 2 or 3 others. They built a condo tower or apartment tower. But they also decided to put state parking on the north side of Capitol Hill. But it was huge transformations like, let's start over. Further out, a little more rugged. Farmers Market, and there was a liquor store at the corner. This is at the corner of what is now Rosa Parks Boulevard and Jefferson Street. Still kind of a rugged area at the time, although I loved that neon sign. I remember, and Farmers Market is a grocery store. The actual Farmers Market was beside it. It was really just some old sheds. But this store, well, guess who ran the store? Right. Were there any signs saying it's a Kroger store? Wonder why. Well, so when we were, idea, and I want to remember this later, when we had the idea, we approached Kroger and said, you need to move because, we're doing this new park, the Bicentennial Mall. And they said, no, we want to stay. We want to stay right beside this Bicentennial Mall. And it took the courage of Jerry Nicely, who was the head of MDHA, and he basically said, you're moving. You're going to move down the street. Got it? And of course, they sort of helped, and the city helped. So the Kroger that's on Rosa Parks Boulevard, which is nice and great store, a regular Kroger store, was built because of that. So looking back at the Civil War and these 2 pictures, what was this incredible structure is now this kind of cute little thing on the hillside. It's like this cute little decorative thing. We've just changed so much. So the idea, and John Bridges is here. Raise your hand, John. John Bridges is the reason the Bicentennial Mall got in front of Governor McWhorter. Now, there had been some studies about doing something north of the Capitol. The famous architect, Robert Church from Knoxville, who's the dean at the School of Architecture, he died right before I got there, which is sad. He was really talented. He'd proposed maybe a lawn or something north of the Capitol, like this, and sort of the big thing is, you've all been here, I hope, and it's one of the greatest places on the planet because of the cultural facilities around it. The big lawn in the middle is almost always open, and it's full of protesters about half the time, stuff like that. But it's a wonderful place to go, and what the symbolism are. It gives that grand vista to where we do democracy. So the idea, not going to be quite as big, is do something like that to the north. And actually, you can see the outline in red. At the very bottom, you see kind of these old sheds. Those were the old sheds of the farmers market that was there. They were open sheds, and they weren't air conditioned. And I think people tried to put plastic down and heat up some areas. It was time to relocate farmers market, and we wanted a view of the Capitol from Jefferson Street. The next major street is Jefferson Street, which is at the bottom. Well, what were you dealing with? Now, here's the Capitol during the Civil War, The Union occupied it early in the war, barricaded around it, and the guy that was in charge was Andrew Johnson, General Andrew Johnson, who then became the vice president and then became president. Not admired by a lot of people in this part of the state, admired by a lot of people from the eastern part of the state, the North and the South. Well, it's really not the North and South. It's a Union and Confederacy, right? Okay, I was reminded that several times. Let's come back to that. So there's a pup tent there, and off in the distance is this land. Okay, what is there? What is there was a creek bed, and this stream, the green is where the mall is going to end up being. Cumberland River's to the right, and that wiggly thing is a stream. It was called the Lick Branch Creek. Why is it called Lick Branch? Well, the stream starts in front of Centennial Park. You go to Centennial Park, right against West End Avenue. They have revealed the spring where it starts, and it runs in a little stream all the way down to the Cumberland River. Now, it's not above ground anymore. They had to bury it. But at one time, this was a place, and on this site, let's see if my little pointer works. Better work. I tried to make it work. Okay, let's see if it works. Come on. It's funny. I'm going to throw it away. Anyway, along that creek were several springs, and one of them was really huge, and it was called the Sulphur Spring. And the reason that's important is that not only was fresh water coming out, but salt was coming out, salt deposits. Why is that important? Salts attract wildlife. Why is that important? It attracts Indians. I'm going to go down and pick off dinner for Mama and take her back. Just the deer are there, the bison are there. The place was a sacred hunting ground. Literally, the Indian tribes that had occupied this area, they weren't around conveniently when James Robertson decided to bring his he came across land, and then John Donaldson joined with flotilla to establish Nashville. Well, it was a pretty good place. You got a big creek, fresh water, salt, a lot of animals with the salt, no Indians at the time, and then you got this big hill nearby, a bluff overlooking the river. And I'll argue that with the bluff and that creek, that's why Nashville is where it is on the Cumberland River, instead of 5 miles down or somewhere else. It's because of that stream, because of the salt. Salt was super valuable. So Timothy DeMumbrian opened a trading post north near Jefferson Street, and he sold, furs and everything, and kind of got along sometimes with the Indians. But James Robertson really, they decided to build Fort Nashboro, and they built it up on the bluff overlooking the river, which made it very safe. The spring had sulfur water pouring out of it all the time, and I'm not exactly sure when this photo was taken, but people would go down there and take baths in it. It's just the thing to do, and you get the bottled water and everything. It smelled really bad, and people thought it was very healthy. But the problem is the land flooded. This is a photo taken from the state capitol looking directly north. You can see I think that's Worthen Bag is the larger structure off in the distance. But before Tennessee and the Corps of Engineers controlled the Cumberland River, this thing flooded all the time. It flooded so much that everybody knew that when the Union decided to, before the Union, the railroads knew that this is going to flood. So in order to have a good way to get across the river and a big bridge and to get around to Union Station, they built this trestle. And that trestle was built out of wood. And it went all the way for like 3rd or 4th Avenue where the land kind of dips. That trestle went all the way around almost to Union Station, very close to it. Well, it started falling apart in the late 1800s, and instead of rebuilding it, they just piled dirt up under it. So when you're in this part of Nashville, you'll notice the rail line is up on this tremendous berm that weaves around that part of the city. That berm was a psychological barrier, like you're either on the right or wrong side of the railroad tracks. I mean, for real. And in this case, it's useless land. It floods. You can't use it. Well, then they had a cholera epidemic, and several other things happened, so they decided to take the creek, channelize it. They first made it straight, and then they just buried it in that sewer. That sewer's still there. It's 18 feet in diameter. They take boat rides down it a couple times a year. Y'all want to sign up? Let me know. We'll get in a boat, go see it. You can go by yourself. I've never been in it. But what you see in the far distance is the Cumberland River where it opens to the river. That sewer is there and it operates right now. Now it's now a stormwater sewer, but originally everything went into that pipe, everything. So you know that's a lot of fun. But when they put that in, then they started bringing in fill and sort of leveled the area off. You know, before urban renewal, this picture, when they'd already cleared the hillside, look at the outline of Tennessee they had on the hill. But it's still flooded, and all of that was finally fixed with the Corps of Engineers. But this land was pretty rugged looking. And there's the railroad up on the earth berm. Distant view, those are the old sheds of Farmers Market. So what John Bridges did is he, working with Victor Johnson with Aladdin Industries, they sort of came up with the idea and they approached the governor and said, look, you know, maybe you should do this for the upcoming Bicentennial celebration in 1996. I think you did your sketch in 1990, is that right? Is that right? Huh? Did you do your sketch in 1990? About that.
It was a little bit earlier than that.
Okay.
But, I can't remember exactly.
Well, John did a very nice site plan, and then he did a view of the Calf-Alton distance. Well, that caught the attention of Victor Johnson. He and they all, you know, they had inroads with McWhorter, and they said, let's do this for the Bicentennial. Well, McWhorter's like, okay. McWhorter establishes a Bicentennial Commission, and at the same time, I'm meeting with some of the state officials, and they said, what do you think about this idea? And I said, well, that's pretty cool. You know, how can I help? And we said, well, you know, okay, we're just going to do a lawn there. And it's going to be, beside it are going to be more state office buildings because the state of Tennessee always needs more state office space, right? No. 1994, we had just started designing the park. Like, what's it going to be? And people with the state saying, you know, it's going to be office buildings here. They'll be maybe 3 to 4 stories tall. And then I get a call from Jerry Preston, who was my boss, 1984. We won't need office buildings. And I said, why not? He said, we bought the American General building. And I said, you did what? We bought the American General building. They're moving out to Brentwood. I said, that's the most expensive per square foot building, commercial building ever built in the city. Travertine on the outside, terrazzo inside, escalators, you name it, with a penthouse on the very top that's worth a visit too. There's a room on the very tip top that's absolutely spectacular. And it turned into a state office building. So, what are we gonna put beside the park? Well, knew one thing, a new farmer's market, and then that did get built. But the real challenge is, why will people come to this? Well, you could do a lawn and you could do trees on it and everything, a few fountains or stuff. But it's like, is that really gonna change the area? Is it gonna be a destination? So, you know, I had John Kyne working on us, Charlie Warfield, I mentioned Mike Fowler, my business partner Steve Tuck, all these different people. We were all gathering with Mike Fitz, state architect, meeting with Senator Henry, McWhorter's administration, all these different groups. What is this gonna be? Well, what is Tennessee? Okay, now if you ask this question, it's like a million things, okay? I made several phone calls. I've been in graduate school at Penn and lived for a summer in Paris, and I called, and back then it was phone calls or mail, letters. Remember letters? Letters with postage on them. You know, it would go there, and people would actually write down nice things, not too fast. And I said to my friends, you know, in Paris and in England, what do you think of Tennessee? Elvis. Well, what else? Country music. What else? Well, Civil War. You know, it names it. But why is Tennessee important? Well, you know, the basics are things like this, the symbols we have, And then this map, or a cross section, Tennessee is defined on the north and south by lines, survey lines. But on the east and west, it's defined by nature, the biggest river in the continent, Mississippi, and the second highest mountains on the east side. So the drawing below, you see all the variety, and it is really true. If someone came and said, you know, God, make a pizza slice of eastern part of the United States that has everything in it, you know, all the vegetation, rivers, all that stuff, and we'll just call it Tennessee. And so there's a wonderful slice of our country with all the variation of stone, waterways, geography, just you name it. It's unbelievable. So we settled on this theme, and we proposed it to, you know, Jerry Preston, that it would be based, the design would be based on the land, the people, and the music of Tennessee. Easy to say, hard to deliver. This was an illustration of the plan. Now, this is looking with north is up, so the state capitol is below. And so that's what we tried to do. How many people have been to the Bicentennial Mall? Most everybody. Okay, yeah, okay. So great. I can kind of cruise through this, but you know that it has green granite. Why does it have green granite on the big map? Because we're a green state. You fly over Colorado or Arizona, you know, that'd be dirt brown. We've got that. It's a wonderful thing. And the map was really fun to do. That map is, I think it's the largest map like that ever made. It was made, fabricated at Cold Springs Granite Company, which is the best granite company in the world, in my opinion, up in near Minneapolis. And the surface, there's almost no color used on the surface. What the difference is the way that the granite is abraded. Now, if you've ever been on top of Legislative Plaza, you know that when it's wet, it's like a big glass slippery thing. You know, we weren't going to do that. We're going to have nice abrasion and stuff. We had a lot of advice, checked on a lot of other examples of people, how they use granite. And then the smaller granite elements that you see there that kind of are the edge of the, before you get James Arnold Parkway, they explain the different states of Tennessee, the geology, the original inhabitants, the original map, the music heritage, state parks, et cetera, et cetera. The railroad was a real challenge because early on when we met James, it was David Johnson, who was a planner out of Knoxville. We were walking around the site and we were looking at that big earth berm. What are we going to do? And he just said, well, just go through it. Okay. So Jerry Preston and I get on a plane. We fly down to CSX to meet with the headquarters. Okay. You know what CSX is? God requests things from CSX. They're like, here. And we go down to the headquarters and we're like, well, we'd like to do a trestle. Uh-huh. We'd like you to maybe help pay for it. Uh-uh. Well, what do we got to do? Well, if you're going to do the trestle, you got to build the trestle while the railroad track's there, and then one day move the railroad tracks onto the trestle, and we will allow you to do that. And I thought, well, okay. Are you going to help pay for it? No. What happened then is David Manning was McWhorter's Commissioner of Finance and Administration, okay, F&A. And Manning was a wizard with how money gets spent. The state of Tennessee every year gets a big chunk of money for it's called ICE-T money, and it stands for like Interstate and Transportation Enhancement money. Okay, well, this project has new roads, it has a trestle, and then it has a few other things. All that money for the state went into this project. The state legislature never voted on it. It was never presented to the state legislature. It was presented to the building commission. Ended up costing 2.5 times what it was going to cost because the state treasurer, Steve Adams, asked me when we were doing the scheme, he said, I don't want to be embarrassed by this thing when I'm old and come back. Can you guarantee that? I said, no, sir, but I can tell you what we'll try is stainless steel, granite, limestone. Just you're investing in the best, hardest materials that will withstand time. And they said, okay. Through the trestle is one of the first things that has kinetics to it, because that kind of visually, it makes you kind of go under the trestle to the river wall. How many rivers are there in the state of Tennessee? You know what the answer is? Depends on who you ask. Because if you ask the Corps of Engineers, they go, oh, you know, you're talking about barges, barges going down the river. Yes, Department of Environment and Conservation, well, there are these little creeks that have these little creatures in them, So navigable waterways, or just any waterway or any creek, easy answer. 31 flavors, like Baskin Robbins. We have, interestingly, and I didn't do that. Everything you see that's at the park, the information was done by the State of Tennessee Museum or the State of Tennessee Library and Archives. And they are the best of the best people. They're just the staffs of those two organizations, I just can't say enough good things about them. And then you have the state parks. The rangers, originally they're going to put Capitol Police in charge of the mall. And they were going to build a fence around the whole thing and lock it up at night. We were like, no, it's going to be open all the time. Are you kidding? Open all the time. Well, put the rangers in charge. J.W. Luna made that happen. Under the McCord administration and the Sundquist administration, when they came in, they said, that sounds great, state park. So it's the smallest state park, but I think it's maybe the most visited one. The Riverwall is really because it's something fun for kids. And then while the parents are sitting there, they read something. The kids don't read stuff on the wall. And so, the fountains are spraying up, that's squatchy. Well, this worked out great. Now, the photo on the right was taken by Keel Hunt. Raise your hand, Keel. Okay, Keel Hunt, great photographer, and you heard him speak about, he's also a good author. He's just good at everything. And such a dear friend. Anyway, he captures this picture. Well, what happened is the first year, the end of the summer after the mall opened in June, and in August, we had this meeting. It was like, what have you guys invented? Well, it's a place for, the filters were clogged with suntan lotion. We didn't, I thought the kids would come up and put their hand on the water like this. You go down there and kids were sitting on top of one of those nozzles, what? But they had a great time, and they still do. And that, to me, is just fun and rewarding. And then, of course, you have something like this. It's the greatest thing to have love of God in your heart. And the next best thing is to have electricity in your house. And my dad said that because he lived in rural Montgomery County. He said they used to have acetylene little lights. And when electricity happened, they had a light bulb, one little bulb in the middle. And they just loved it. Electricity was so cool. And why did electricity happen? Because of the management of the dams. It provided energy and just changed our state. Okay, so there's a central lawn, and this photo was taken, I think, the first year the project was open. To the east side is, that's about the land, and it's about the variation of plants and topography and texture from one end of the state to the other. Mike Fowler was landscape architect, and he did an extraordinary job on this project. I owe almost everything to Mike and his team. We worked together. We argued a lot. He won most of the arguments. He's a really bright guy. And we wanted to have plants, and this is scouring rush. It's also called horsetail, and it grows all over West Tennessee, and it grows in Middle Tennessee. I have it on my property, but they used to bundle it together and make brooms out of it. And it's just kind of a cool plant. People from New York go, what is that? We also on that side have a county marker for all 95 counties, because like it or not, this was yet another Tennessee project in Nashville. So all the other counties are not happy about that. You get another big project. So one of the things we met early on is how can we have every county involved in the project? So one of the ideas is we'll have them bury a time capsule full of their stuff. So there are 95 time capsules. They're about They're about 2.5 feet tall, about almost 2 feet in diameter. They're sealed up, nitrogen and everything, and they were dropped into the ground in April of 1996, right before the park opened. They're full of everything: guns, Bibles, liquor bottles, papers, photos, no moon pies or things like that, but everything else. And they're going to be opened in 2096, when Tennessee is 300 years old. And I don't know what they're going to do with the stuff, because it's more stuff. I mean, King Tut's has the good stuff, but we got a lot of stuff. What are they going to do with it? Maybe I'll live long enough to design a building to display the stuff. Well, probably not. Then theaters, Martha Ingram was heavily involved in the Bicentennial celebration. She was chairman of the Bicentennial Commission, and she's like the most wonderful woman. We're so lucky to have Martha Ingram here, and she's done so many things. Governor Sundquist treated her terribly when he came into power. Sundquist tried to stop the mall, and he literally told that he wanted to stop the mall, and his new F&A commissioner that took the place of David Manning was a young guy, and he said, "Governor, let's talk about that a little later," because the contracts had already been signed before McCord left office, before Sundquist arrived. So it was a train that had left the station. But this one young man said, "Well, Governor Sundquist, let's talk about that later. Move on." That man was Bob Corker, who was a fraternity brother of mine. I was a Sigma Chi at UT. He was a couple years older, a whole lot smarter, and a whole lot richer. I mean, he was one of the smartest people I have ever known, and one of the best guys I've ever known. But he called me right after that happened with Sundquist saying, "I want to stop it." He said, "You got to come down to the Capitol." I said, "Why?" And he said, you guys are doing this Bicentennial Mall. We don't know what it is." I drove down to Capitol, got in his car, drove around the site. It was just a big muddy mess, terrible situation, because it's just stuff's going everywhere. It's a mud bath. This is January of 1995, like 1 week after Sundquist was inaugurated. And so we went back to his office, and he said, "If this project gets in trouble, I may not be able to help you." And I said, "Well, I've got to have a replacement for Jerry Preston. He was my client. I had a state client that I met with, and he, because he left with everybody else in McCord's administration, they moved out to the Tennessee Board of Regents. That was kind of the Democratic fiefdom out on Murfreesboro Road. That's where they all go, and the Republicans were taking over. So I said, "Well, you've got to have a replacement." And he said, "I have it. His name's Bill McDonald. He done a lot of work for me in Chattanooga. He's going to come up." And that made sure the project was finished and done correctly, because Bill McDonald, he didn't care about politics. He cared about construction. And he was wonderful to deal with. And of course, then Sundquist, dedicated the park. Back to Martha Ingram. Martha Ingram, of course, was heavily involved in having celebrations. They had a lot of events and plays and, all kinds of performance things. But she was very involved. We had meetings with her, and we said, "Well, we ought to have a theater or some type of space like that." And who did the great theaters? The Greeks. There we go again, okay? So we patterned after, of course, we have lawns. They're called parons, and it's a little different strategy. The place will hold 2,000 people with chairs, but without the chairs, it'll still hold almost 1,000. And because of the lawns, they're of the height that you can sit on the edge, and so you don't always have to have chairs. On the east, that's on the east side, and in the middle of all the west side is about the people, and we proposed a timeline and these vertical elements. I was a great fan of the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, and if you remember, there's this monolith that's there. And I ended up being able to convince the state to do these things, and I sent a letter to Arthur C. Clarke. He was living in Sri Lanka, and he wrote me back. It said, it's kind of a cryptic note. I think he died the next year, but where these ideas come from, who knows? But what we did want to do is symbolically showcase the disaster of the Civil War, where time just kind of blew apart into fragments. It was the easy thing to do. It was hard to kind of pull it off, because we had drawings and everything's different angles. And then this marker, okay? Remember I said Union, Confederacy, north and south. Well, Lynn Bachlita, who wrote all the text, she was the final writer of all the text you see at the Bicentennial, all the text on the history wall, everywhere. She was brilliant. She's great to work with. We got in these huge arguments. And she was saying, you know, white guys are the reason that our country is so screwed up. And I'd say, I know. You're right. We are, okay? When we talked about the Civil War, and I said, well, I like North-South. And she said, well, that's incorrect. That's not correct, Kim. It's Union Confederacy. And I said, well, it just so happens that that north thing is on the north side of the park, and south is on the south part of the side. She didn't like that either. But when you walk up, you have to decide whose side you're going on, because that's what you had to do in the Civil War. Are you for the Union, or are you for the Confederacy? And, you know, it's a history that's never, you know, I'm now on the Tennessee Historical Commission. We voted on something, the Confederate Monument over on in Centennial Park, and it's a part of our heritage that's really complicated, really complicated. So you see the markers now, of course, the trees are all, you know, grown up. These tulip poplars along the street are enormous. They were going to build a new World War II memorial on the north side of Capitol Hill. Okay, now we already had a Tennessee World War II memorial. What was it? It was the State Library and Archives. Yes, somebody said that. That's the answer. Well, you went in there was a plaque, you know, thank you to everybody that lost their lives and everything. Well, the veterans are like, you know, that's not enough. So the veterans approached Mike Fitz about doing a statue on the north side of the hill, and he came to me and I said, look, that's a lousy location. There's no parking up there, you know, and it's even got worse after 9/11. So we should do something different and use, instead of a statue, how could one statue represent World War II? I mean, it could be 5 people. It's still, it was a colossal event, but we had photographs, tons of photographs. So we could have images and then emotions. The globe. I called General Stevenson. He was the head of the World War II Memorial Trust. I said, General, is good news, bad news? Okay, what is it? Good news is we found the globe. It will be the largest engraved globe. It weighs 8 tons, black granite. What's the bad news? There's only one place we can get it, General, and that's Germany. Well, General Stevenson was a remarkable man, and he had flown over D-Day in a fighter plane, and he says on the phone, he says, well, you're not talking about the Nazis, you're talking about the Germans. And I said, yeah, and he said, well, you know, they're our allies, they're good guys, you know, that's not a problem. And the guy that made the globe, or his company, actually came to the dedication of the memorial. And then on the floor scattered, the Gold Star Monument, which you know as you see Blue Star highways, that's about people that served. Gold stars are where someone died, your brother, your sister, your uncle, son, whatever, and gold stars. And when you see the movie Saving Private Ryan, it starts out with a door opening up and 2 guys are coming up to her house and the door opens and there are 4 banners and they have blue stars on them, 4. And they are telling her that 3 of your sons are gone. And it's really hard for me to watch that because then those stars turn to gold stars, but that's why they had to save the 4th son. And that's the whole story of the movie, Gold Star. And at night it's fun. You know, we included the bombing in Nagasaki. That's how the war ended. You know, again, it's kind of like the atomic weapon of urban renewal. Was it the right thing to do? People are going to argue about it forever. And then at nighttime. And this is a dedication. The little hand at the bottom, that's my son, TJ. He's now 33, going on 13. And everybody involved in the project, the World War II Memorial Trust, they're all gone.
Really?
So this became this. Now, of course, then the carillon was finished later. Carillon with the columns and the base of the columns. It's about the music of Tennessee and their names of musicians, not just musicians, people that have had influence in the music of the state. That includes classical composers, producers, all kinds of people that have made our state so rich in music. You know, and at night they're illuminated. You guys have probably seen this. But I want to remind that those represent the voices of the people. They're 95 bells, 50 columns, 95 bells, you know, one for each county. And some of them are little bitty bells. And then one is really big, it's a C bell. But we wanted an answer bell up on Capitol Hill because it's like the people are out here complaining or suggesting, and they want to hear an answer. And so we have the answer bell. And the answer bell is at the bottom. And this is it. And it's the largest bell in Nashville. It's 5 feet in diameter. And the Caroline, you know, ding, 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 ding. And this is the octave lower, dong. And you can't hear it unless the wind is blowing north. But this was really fun to design. What did we use? Well, the Courageous Monument of the Socrates and this other structure in Athens called the Tower of the Winds. I really like that structure. It's an observatory. And it had these wonderful carvings originally on it. Some of them still stand. And they represent the winds of Athens, the 8 winds of Athens. Apparently, Athens during the year get winds, and this is the winter wind, so it's represented by an old guy, an old angel guy. Well, I thought, this would be so cool, we can do these. And I thought, maybe I can draw these. And I thought, no, I got to have my bud, Paul Harmon. I don't know how many of you know Paul Harmon. He's one of the most famous Tennessee artists. He's like 83 years old. I saw him 2 weeks ago. And he drew these figures. They're the musics of Tennessee, the musics, like M-U-S-I-C-K-S, like the muse. They're female angels, and each one of them represent a different type of musical style that we have in our state. So that's the representation, and then you can see the image on the right. It's, you know, it's up beside the Capitol, but, you know, I don't know that they're ringing it as often as I'd want them to, but they do ring it occasionally. And to see, Paul did a line sketch of each of these angels. But the Cold Springs Granite liked it so much that they embossed it and made it deep. They just did that at their own expense and freaked me out. It's like, that's so cool. And they said, well, you know, we weren't working on much that week, and we just wanted to make this really cool. And so then the bell rings. So, you know, the view is wonderful, and there was a master plan to build the State Museum on the east side and State Library and Archives on the east side. To the west side, up on the corner, you see an object up on the corner of the site plan, and that was the new museum, National Museum of African American Music, which was going to be there on Jefferson Street. It was one of the coolest things our firm has ever designed. It was going to be so cool. The drums were in it because slave masters would not allow drums because, you know, slaves would, you know, that means meet me at the river, we're out of here, okay? So, and travel long distance, you know, the sound would travel long distance. So we were going to do this enormous glass drum, and then others with images of all the people. I love Jimi Hendrix, you know, his music is so cool. And so we were going to do that, but they just had trouble raising money because of the Great Recession. So that facility moved downtown to 5th and Broad. I encourage all of you to go to it. It's a really cool place to visit. We lost the commission, but I said, well, you know, if you're going inside a building, you don't need us. But then the other dream happened, 2 cultural facilities built beside the park, like in Washington. It actually happened. State Museum. I hope everybody has been there. It's done by Gary Everton's firm, which is called EOA, and they work with a firm out of Minneapolis, design the structure. The lobby is absolutely gorgeous, 3 stars, and the exhibits are phenomenal. I mean, really, if you bring anybody in state, you know, anybody to visit, go there. You'll be there for 2 hours. It just goes by that quick. It's so much fun. And then our firm got to, this is the biggest project I'll ever design, which is the State Library and Archives, which is on the other side of the mall from the State Museum. Now, this is more of a research place, so, you know, you can go there, but the real fun on this was, how do we remind people it's not just a state office building? Well, the way to do that, we thought, is to have the symbols of the state of Tennessee on the exterior. That was really hard to do because, you know, including Trey Hargett, the Secretary of State, he's like, "Well, we really need to do that?" I said, "Yeah, we really need to do that," because in addition to being something fun, you could have like a little quiz, get elementary kids to walk around and say, "Okay, how many birds do we have? Okay, how many birds do we have? We have 2, right? We have 2 2 reptiles. We have 2 trees. What's the state beverage? Milk, that's right, milk. Isn't that crazy? Should be, you know, it should be whiskey. We have a state dog. We have 2 state fishes. Isn't that cool? And so putting those panels are stainless steel, they'll be there forever, state seal in the middle. This is worth visiting. This is just one of 3 enormous robotic chambers inside the building. And if you go and ask, they'll take you up there and, get a group together and go see, you'd like to see robots. To see them in action is just will freak you out because all the books they're not in the normal order like you had in a library where they're lined up with the regular thing and you have the number in there. A book goes in there, it's got a little tag on it, and the computer knows where it is. Well, they'll pull a book out, and the robot will come up and bring the book, and then later after the book's used, they'll come back in, and the robot will come back, and it might be put in a different box. They're in different boxes of different sizes, but they're not arranged like the normal library. It's over. Remember card catalogs? Yeah. Doing this saved, the original building scheme was 260,000 square feet. The guy that programmed the building worked for us on this, walked in and told Riley Darnell, who's Secretary of State, he was the one, Trey Hargett was responsible for this being done, and he was a great client to work with. Riley was the one, though, that heard about the project, and this guy said, "I can save 100,000 square feet from 260 to 160. Well, we're talking about some major, major money by doing robotic storage. And it's not new. I mean, it's been used in factories and it's used in a lot of libraries, a lot of storage libraries and stuff. So it's just the way to go. And then the main reading room's worth a visit. I pulled a technique where we're bouncing sunlight off the louvered edge there. And so those sheets of light, they actually move during the day as the sun moves. And if clouds go over, they dim and then they come back alive. And it makes the building feel like it's alive. And that's a technique that I learned from Louis Kahn with the Kimball Museum in Fort Worth. You know, the exterior side, people have asked me, I said, well, I'd call it statuesque style. Well, and why are we here? Because I had to do this new book because in the past 25 years, just photographers have a good time at this place. And so, Keel won and, Robin Hood and Bob Schatz and all these people, park rangers, everybody, photos like this. Now, remember I told you about the fountains had the problem with all the suntan lotion. Well, they fixed that, and then they added LED lights, and now it's just wild. It's so much fun to go down there and watch it. And an aerial photo shows up like this. Yeah, that's pretty cool. We didn't have drones when we were doing this project. So it was sort of, and then this photo. I remember the guy that sent this photo, I said, you know what, the park doesn't look that good. I mean, it's nice and I love it, but look at this photo. So I decided to do a book, and I brought some copies if you'd like to buy one, and on the back are some really wonderful quotes. The top quote on the back is from Phil Bredesen, who was there last week at Parnassus, and the quote at the bottom on the back is by Martha Ingram. And I had other quotes from Keel and from Bill Haslam and other folks that just helped make this project get accomplished, and then the other projects get accomplished. The museum, the library and archives. And this is what we'll probably see on St. Patrick's Day. I think they did this last year. And so with that, I'll say thank you for listening.